Okay, here at Muttleys Garage, we are doing the front brakes. I kind of skipped a few steps here. There are just a couple of those two bolt holes. They just hold a couple of these 12 millimeter bolts, 13 millimeter, sorry. And the caliper, you actually pry it off here, but leave the pad, and you pry the caliper off. And then the caliper just comes off and it's hanging down there. So I kind of skipped that step. But the next thing we're going to do is open up the bearing cap and pull the bearings out. Now, I bought cryo-treated rotors. He suggested not drilled and slotted. That was the gentleman at Centric Parts. He used to work at Summit. A very nice guy, was very knowledgeable, knew exactly what I was doing, said, don't do that. So he did say, you know, cryo-treating's fine, it'll take a few more weeks, and I wasn't in a big hurry. So in fact, they also sent me the appropriate pads that go with them, or Summit did, but the guy suggested the right kind, and you can tell they're exactly the same one, so that's good. This wire, which I've separated it from the brake line wire, see if I can move more slowly so people don't get car sick, that is the front ABS signal line right here. This is the ABS line. So we're gonna I just disconnected it from these little clamps and separated them so that the ABS can stay on the back side of the hub. I'm not removing any of that. It's part of the casting, and the sensor goes in the back. We'll leave that alone. I also checked to make sure that my hub looked right. They do include the studs. They have the inner races, or the outer races, sorry. So I'm going to have to get the bearings from the store. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull this off and make sure that the brakes are identical, the brake discs. They sure look like it. I mean, come on. So, yeah, they are very heavy. But anyway, so they look right. I'm pretty happy about that. There was a little confusion about the diameter, but I talked to the guy, again, at Centric. It's kind of a branding thing there, and he said, yeah, you're going to be fine. So I will lay them back to back, because there was about a 1/4 inch difference between two of the sizes that are apparently used for this van. So we will peel off the cap and pull out the castellated nut cotter pin and unscrew the nut and pull this out. I think that's all we have to do. I'm going to also put some gloves on. Okay, this was a bit technique-y. I'm using this as a hammer, but I just tapped along here, kind of at an angle, and this started to pop loose, because I don't want to bend and ding this thing up. So it's really a good idea that we get this out intact. This is the grease cap, and I'd like to reuse it because it's in good shape. This van has not been abused too badly, so we're getting it ready for the summer. Anyway, let's just gently pry that out. I don't have discs, so I can spin it freely. I'm pretty sure the bearings are in good shape, but that's okay. All right, we have the cotter pin here, so we will remove it. Feels like you see a lot of guys do this. They'll cut one and they'll bend the other. I think it's because they want it to come straight out, but I don't know why they do that. I'm not really in love with the way that some people do that. It's just their personal preference. Because see, now I'm having a hard time straightening it. There, I think I got enough. Good. So this comes out. We'll set that down there. And then this little cap, it's just a castellated sort of cap that comes out and just slides right out. Then I'm going to wipe this clean and remove the nut. I'm sure it's torqued, and there is a torque spec for this when you put it back on, so you got to be careful. Yeah, this looks pretty fresh. I hate to do it, but these rotors they have cementite, which is a conversion of the metal surfaces, and they'll be perfectly flat when you turn them, and when you heat them they'll start to warp, and then they'll flatten back out again. It's time for new rotors then. probably from braking down hills quite a bit. So, all right, you'll notice this is all clean now. I'm ready to undo it. I also use anti-seize on the studs. I've had studs completely lock up. Obviously, the previous owner had taken good care of this car. I happen to know him. A couple other things you'll see here is I'm using Bilstein shocks, which are great. And I had a couple of the tie rod and a couple of the other parts replaced. So just as a by-the-by, I didn't. That was done by a service place. I'll do some work on my car, but I won't do all of it. So there you have it. Okay, I'm going to try to take this off with a impact wrench. Well, that wasn't hard. Presto change out. It's probably a little on the loose side. So, good. Pretty happy about that. Everything's coming loose. We carefully take the outer race bearings out. Put it in the order that I got it in. I'm going to lay this down and I'm going to compare it to what I have. So, let's do that first. All right, so there's, whoops, kind of got the case of the loose tripod. Okay, that's that. Sure looks the same as the one I've got here. I'll just lay them down next to each other gently so I don't knock off all my paint. Suck in a bunch of dirt. Yeah, that's the same. So now I'm going to have to get the bearings. I'm going to pull these out. And I got to go to the store and do that, so we'll take a break and get back to putting these on. You can see the sensor for the ABS, which is right there. I'll clean it off a little bit. And that sensor gets very near these gears, and it tells whether there's velocity that's different between one tire and the other. So we'll deal with that later. Just a little comparison note here. You can see that they are exactly the identical size, so, and they say cryo, so they're ready to go on. I just got to get some bearings for them, so that's my next move. I think the other thing worthy of note is there's actually a seal here. Seal here, and I got to pull that out, and then the outer race lays underneath that. You can't really pull it out until you get that seal out. It keeps everything in there, mostly grease, so I'm going to take care of that. As well. I'll bring all that in and they will match it perfectly. So it didn't come with the kit. I was kind of sad about that. I really wish they would have, but they didn't. And I didn't really trust using online for just the little bits and bobs. Okay, this, my friends, is a seal remover. And basically you come in here and you pop it out like that, which I'm going to do. I'll set the camera down, hopefully in a decent angle so you can see what I'm doing, because I have to remove it and you have to replace it. So there's one seal, there's none on the other side, just on this side as I recall. Yeah, that's the way it is. So the inner one has a seal, and as you can see, this seal was good. There was no leakage, no grease, no nothing. So even though these are a bit corroded, everything was basically in pretty good shape, but these things are warping. So all right, let's give that a whirl. See if I can get a decent angle. Alright, I think we got kind of a nice little, there's a shorter and a longer one. We're going to go for the longer one. Well, that was easy. Popped right out. I probably didn't even really hurt it. So, there's the seal. And here's the note that the inner race and bearing are all one piece. And so I'll wipe those clean, take this, and this in, and verify I get the right ones, and I'm kind of coasting home free on that then. So here are the 3 items I got to bring in times 2 outer and inner, or inner and outer bearings from the inner race. The inner race is contained on them. They're tapered bearings. And then the seal for the inside. The seal is almost reusable, but I would never dare put it in without put a new seal in that wasn't. I would never put the old seal in. I'd always replace it with the new one. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, I'm switching modes here at Muttleys Garage back to my old digital camera, but I wanted to show you that the seal that I got, even though the lip is a bit wider, it fits right on top of the back of the brake. So at this point I am ready to install the rear bearing, the rear seal. Then I'll slide the whole thing, I'm zoomed all the way out here, slide the whole thing onto the spindle after I clean the spindle off and add some more grease. I need to pack grease on the bearing and then put the outer bearing on with grease and then attach and clean and attach and torque down the main spindle nut. Okay, so of course I leave it till the very end. See if I can clean off the lens here. Oh no, that's just glare. Okay, I leave it till the very end. Look, it's very dark to do the one thing I have to do here, and that is wipe all the grease off the spindle. We'll want to do that ASAP, get that clean, and then we start putting new grease on. So that's all I'm doing here. I'm just using a normal blue shop towel, and everything seems to be in pretty good shape. There's a little light corrosion, but there's no reason to handle these spindles in any special way. They're in good shape. I wanted to add that since these discs are not slotted, they're not sided, so one disc can go on either side, so you buy the same part number for both wheels. And I will be putting the part number in the link at the bottom of the screen, so you can get all the part numbers that I used. So the next thing we're going to do is take out our Timken bearing. I checked them already for fit. We don't need the outer race because the bearing outer race is already pressed into the brake, and you can prove that by just setting that in there and it spins nice and freely. But what we have to do next is come in here and grease this bearing. So I'm going to put grease in the palm of my hand, and you press it in until it comes out the top of this bearing, as well as maybe a little out the bottom. So I'll show a little of that technique, but I won't make you sit through the whole thing. I'm sure you've seen this a million times before, but this is the technique I use. I press the bearing into the palm, and I'm feeding the grease from the outside inwards. And you can cup your hand, wipe off the excess. It still has to go through until you see it start to push up through the slot in the top of the bearing. And you can just use it over and over again. This is fresh grease. It's not going to hurt anything. I'm using fresh gloves. Not really going to make a mess on me. I already made a mess on the brake there, so I'll slide this over, clean that up. We don't want grease on our brake disc surfaces. So I'll pause here and finish the job and then place it in the disc.